This is House Planning Help episode 51. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and it's a slightly different opening today because it's a special episode. I'm on my own and I want to share some information about my Kickstarter campaign. If you're listening to this in May 2014, please stay with me. Normally I like to create evergreen content, episodes that you would want to listen to regardless of the time. But this one is specifically relevant in May 2014 because it is a Kickstarter campaign to raise funds for my documentary. And after May, well, it will either be funded or it won't be funded. I don't know at this stage because it's right at the beginning of May. It's the 1st of May when I'm recording this. So if you're listening after this date, I'm not going to delete this episode, but I'm going to keep it here online in the archive for anyone who would like to listen to it to see what did happen, how it all unfolded. I wanted to start this rather than telling you about what I would like to do by telling you why I want to do it. And that actually hasn't changed at all. You may have heard this story before. When I finished my final job as an employee working in traditional media, I had that option of what do I do next? And I've been thinking about starting up a business. Perhaps I didn't know the specific focus, but what I did know and what I was very clear about was my why. Whatever business I set up, the focus is on trying to help in the fight against climate change, trying to improve that situation. I know probably it's going to be a tiny help, but I want it to be helping. If my business isn't doing that, then I'm doing something wrong. A lot of people tend to switch off when you mention the words climate change, and I totally understand that. You can't see it. It's hard to link one event to another. It's not impacting that heavily on our lives today, but that may change as time goes on. And that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to construction, because although it's a major contributor to the problem, CO2 emissions, there's also such a large amount of room for improvement. You'll know if you've been listening to this podcast series, we've talked about various things. Some of them just make sense, don't they? You don't need to think too hard about, climate change, do I believe in that? It's sense from the point of saving money, increasing comfort, and as a byproduct, it's saving the energy too. We've mentioned the Passive House Standard, and I've focused a lot of these podcasts on that because I believe if you built a house to that standard, perhaps there will be other things that you could do to improve on it or to make it better, but it is a really rigorous standard. It puts the bar incredibly high. So that is why we've been talking about that on a number of different episodes, and there are various other things that all click into place. But I set up a production company largely because those were the skills that I had. Come from the media, so I know a lot about video. I started making videos when I was about 12, and I've worked in radio and produced different documentaries and video bits through the years. So both of those things I'm very familiar with. And I set up this production company with the idea of helping people in the environmental space to get their messages out there. Okay, I'm a realist and I know that to begin with, I've just got to do any work that I can, but that is where I want to be honing it down. To give you a little example, this week I was filming at a secretarial college, and that's great. This is good for money, keeping things going, keeping me on track, but it's not exactly where my passion lies. And so the more I can get focused perhaps on construction, try and narrow the field down, and then ecological building, well, that's perfect if I'm helping those people. That's where I'm trying to go. And it's the same with House Planning Help. It started out as a hobby. It does make me some money, but the idea behind it is that it's creating content under my own steam to just spread the message. People don't have to like the message, they don't have to do anything about it, but just looking at the best practices out there and trying to put a spotlight on those people who are doing good things, because there are a lot of people who are really pushing boundaries. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where you just think, oh my goodness, every time a bad building gets built, a fairy dies. It's that kind of thing. So it is about awareness. And the average person on the street, I feel, doesn't really know what constitutes a quality building. I didn't up until recently, but I certainly feel I have a much better idea now. And it will be brilliant to get that message out to others. As I say, perhaps they won't want to take it on board. Maybe they're not in a position to, but if they know about it, then that's got to count for something. I'm just going to mention episode 15 that we did with Caesar Abaid, and perhaps because of my skill sets, I'm very confident that the internet is a place that we need to be exploiting and that there are ways that we can all have our say online. I'm sure we know about them, but it's a much more structured way of getting a message out there, and because of the amount that we use the internet to search, you can create that content to then go out and help others, guide others on this path. Let's get to what I would like to do. Yes, it's a documentary. You probably know some of these facts already. It's going to be focused on airtightness. Why? Well, I don't want to confuse the message, and I hope, or I will be making a concerted effort not to. We could have made it on the Passive House standard, and of course I'll be alluding to that and what we've learnt. And Paul often, he's tested some of the most energy efficient houses in the UK, which are Passive House standard houses. Airtight, I feel, is misunderstood. People don't know about it, and it would just be good to demystify it. So that's the idea of this documentary. It's saying this is one element. It's not the whole picture. You don't need to understand the whole picture. We're just talking about one part of what could make our houses thermally efficient. Paul Jennings, I mentioned Paul. I've interviewed him before. It was episode 26. He is an air leakage expert. He's one of the UK's top... No, let's rephrase that. He is the top air leakage expert in the UK. And quite often when I go and check out these houses, as I mentioned, it comes back and I find out, yep, Paul's tested that one too. He's a man of integrity. This is one of the reasons that I'm so keen to work with him. He doesn't mince his words. I'll give you a little story. There's a video that we've made for this Kickstarter page, and I had to try and get out some sound bites from him. I knew roughly what he might say, but he was so good at just coming up with these sound bites as if he's just in that mode. And that's what I like. I think he comes across really well on camera. He's clearly done this for a long time. He's got strong links with organisations that I respect, such as the AECB and the Passive House Trust. So that is all very good as well. In terms of style, I'd like this, obviously, to be educational, but also entertaining. I don't want to overload people. I want them to come away with a better understanding. People who might watch Grand Designs, I suppose, or similar house building programs like that, they have this interest. Perhaps they don't want to go deep into it, but it would be great just to get the fundamentals through to them. It has to be entertaining too, because this can be a dry subject. I know if I was aiming at a different audience, going for people in the construction industry, I think they'd enjoy that. But I would like it to have a lighter note too. And although a lot of it is about Paul and the work that he does, going around with the blower door, testing various different buildings, I hope to chat to some of the people that he will come into contact with every day. So it could be homeowners, it could be people who work on housing developments, have to project manage lots of multiple units being made. So I would like this to be a documentary that flows quite nicely. We'll put in the work up front, and I must mention about who we've got on the team and why we've got them there. Elron Burrell, who I work with on my ebook, I found him a pleasure to work with. He knows his stuff. He's very visible on social media. He works for one of the top sustainable architect firms in the UK. So he's a great person to have on board. I also want someone who knows absolutely nothing. And Steve Folland is a radio contact of mine. He was a presenter for many, many years. A very funny guy, but just has such a good sense of what makes compelling content. One of the reasons that I want him on this team is because he doesn't know too much of the building aspects and making things energy efficient. So he will be a good person to have on board just to keep us in that mainstream space. Keep it entertaining, but keep it factual. He knows what this is about. So I really want him on this team too. Then we've got the man who's filming it all, who is Mike Coe. And we're going to feature him on an upcoming podcast because he used to work for the UK network ITV, and he was a cameraman for their news team for a number of years. So he's got the skills, but also on the flip side, he's someone who's really passionate about environmental issues. He lives in an autonomous house, which is why we'll be featuring him in a future episode of House Planning Help. It's an incredibly ambitious or boundary pushing house that he lives in, because not only is it up to Passive House standard, but it's autonomous. So it has a composting toilet and all of these different things that mean he is self-sufficient. But we'll find out about that in another episode. He is a valuable person to have on this team. And when it comes to editing, we also have another professional who has worked for ITV. His name is Tim Weymouth. He's done some serious documentaries and also some work in entertainment too. He knows how to keep this crisp, and the other advantage is that he will do this in a short space of time. We can get it really focused and edited so that we're going to hit all of our deadlines. They are my team members, and I'm very excited to have them on board. So how does Kickstarter work? Well, it's a crowdfunding platform. It's not a charity. There are rewards on offer, and each of those rewards is given a price. You can make a donation. There's nothing wrong with that, and people have already done that. Or you can get something in return for your money. So let me give you 3 examples of rewards that we have. You can be amongst the first to see the documentary, and I've put this up at £15, so you'll get a digital download. You'll be one of those first people to see it, and then you'll get thrown in the ebook that I made with Elrond about why most people don't build energy efficient homes. Some great information in there. It's all condensed. It's all in a good order. Then we've got exclusive signed DVDs. As I mentioned, this is launch day at the moment. We're about 6 hours in, and this seems to have been popular so far. The signed DVDs at £50. There's a t-shirt that says air test in progress as well, and some of the other things that we just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, all of those thrown in. And right at the top end of the scale, if Richard Branson is listening now, this one's for you, although probably you can throw in, just add a couple of noughts to the end of this, but for £1,500, you can feature in the finished documentary. So we'll come and test your house in terms of airtightness, do that test, have you as part of the documentary, because we will be testing a number of different houses, and then you'll get to have lunch with Paul and me. So I think that's what more could you want? You'll also be credited as the executive producer, because you'll be throwing the funds our way in a big slice of the pie. So that would be fantastic if that's you. I'm totally aware that's not most of us. So how can you help? Well, backing our project is the main thing. At any level, it can start at £1. It can be as much as you want, any range. And to do that, all you need to do is go to houseplanninghelp.com/Kickstarter. There's a video there. You can look at all of the rewards. Clearly, I've only mentioned a handful of them. Not even a handful. I mentioned 3, didn't I? But you can look through those, see if there's anything that you particularly want, and make a bid that way. I understand that not all of us have a lot of cash, so don't worry if that's you and you feel you can't support the campaign. Just do it a different way. Spread the message. I know that you're passionate about this, so it's important to keep the momentum going. Maybe you could retweet something that I'd tweeted out, or perhaps you can help in some other way. Just tell a friend about what we're doing, someone who's interested in energy efficiency. So houseplanninghelp.com/Kickstarter will take you to our page. Why do I think this is going to work? I do think this is going to work. Wholeheartedly, I believe it will, because as I see it, this is just the beginning. This is something really simple that we can put together, and we need to turn up the volume on all of these issues, not just in housing, in terms of environmental issues. There's a lot of wastage that's going on, and I personally see us as a species, we're going to have to turn over a new leaf of how we're living. Doesn't mean things are going to get worse, but just a simpler life. We're having to go back to what we really need rather than going crazy. But that's a story for another time. The other reason I think we'll be successful is that we've got a very engaged community, and I frequently get emails, and I can just tell when someone emails me, perhaps there's something they want to know about or to put on this list of content that I can create further down the line. They are just as passionate as I am, and I know I'm in contact with those people. We all want the same thing at the end of the day, and perhaps 6 hours in, with 12 people who've already taken our total up to nearly 10%. We're a little off 10%, but 10% of the overall total, and it's day 1 out of 30. That speaks volumes for me. So I thought, rather than read out the names of everyone at the end of the campaign, just for those first few people who've taken that initiative, I really want to thank you, because you've got the ball rolling. So Mike Russell, Jeremy Murfitt, Kay Adam Smith, who happens to be my gorgeous wife. We're expecting our first child in about 4 months' time. Yeah, I know, it's exciting. John Mason, Timothy Lind, Nick Grant, maybe a name if you're in the environmental space. I'm sure you will know Nick from the Passive House Trust, also Elemental Solutions. Corinne Mitchell, I've chatted to her quite a bit on email. Tim Shepherd, all of these people, the names I recognise. Helen Seymour Smith, Andrew Goodman. He runs an architecture firm in Hartford. This is where I live, which is fantastic, and I quite often bump into him out on the streets. He's walking his dog or going for a run or helping one of his family members. So Andrew's a top guy. Maybe we'll have to get him onto the podcast at some point, but good architecture. There's Anthony Copley, Bill Linton. Those are the 12 people that have helped out so far. One final time, I'll give you the address, houseplanninghelp.com/Kickstarter. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate that you've come this far. And next time, a normal service will be resumed. I chat to Lisa Pasquale from Six Cylinder Limited about thermal imaging. I'll see you then.